The first time I saw my sister standing on the front porch of my dream house, she was holding a silver key in one hand and smiling like she had won something. For a few seconds, I could not move. The house stood behind her, quiet and beautiful beneath the tall oak trees. It had pale blue walls, white window frames, and a wide porch that wrapped around the front. I had loved that house since I was 12 years old. Back then, I would ride my bicycle past it after school and imagine myself living there one day. Now my sister, Renee, was unlocking the door. "Why do you have a key?" I asked. She looked at me with a calm expression. "Because the house is mine now." The words did not sound real. My name is Maya Johnson. I was 36 years old then, working long night shifts as a nurse in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was a Black American woman who had spent most of my adult life taking care of other people. I cared for my patients, helped my mother with her bills, and supported Renee whenever she found herself in trouble. I had never asked for much in return. The blue house was the only dream I had held close for years. It had belonged to an elderly woman named Mrs. Holloway. She had lived there alone for as long as anyone in the neighborhood could remember. When I was a child, she sometimes invited me inside for lemonade. Her home smelled like cinnamon, old books, and polished wood. There was something peaceful about it. Mrs. Holloway knew how much I loved the house. "One day," she once told me, "this place needs someone who will love it, not just own it." I carried those words with me for more than 20 years. While other people spent money on expensive clothes and new cars, I saved everything I could. I worked extra shifts. I skipped vacations. I lived in a small apartment with old furniture because every dollar mattered. Renee knew all of this. She was 3 years older than me and had always been different. She loved attention. She changed jobs often and spent money quickly. Still, she was my sister and I loved her. When her marriage ended, she moved in with me for 6 months. When her car was taken by the bank, I helped her buy another one. When she needed money for rent, I gave it to her without asking when she would pay me back. I believed family should help family. Maybe that was why I did not notice how closely she had been watching my dream. A few months before I saw her on that porch, Mrs. Holloway passed away. She had no children, and the house was placed on the market by a distant nephew. The moment I heard, I called the real estate agent. I had enough money for the down payment. My credit was good. I had already spoken with the bank. For the first time in my life, my dream felt close enough to touch. I told Renee during Sunday dinner at our mother's house. "I'm going to make an offer on the Holloway place," I said. My mother smiled warmly. "You've talked about that house since you were a little girl." Renee looked down at her plate. "How much are they asking?" she said. I told her. She gave a small laugh. "That old house, it probably needs a lot of work." "I don't mind," I said. "I've been saving for years." Renee did not say anything else. 2 days later, I submitted my offer. The agent sounded positive. She told me there were other interested buyers, but she believed I had a strong chance. I spent that whole week imagining the rooms. I pictured a reading chair near the front window. I imagined cooking in the large kitchen and drinking coffee on the porch before work. Then, suddenly, the agent stopped returning my calls. 3 days passed. On the 4th day, she finally answered. "I'm sorry, Maya," she said quietly. The seller accepted another offer. My heart dropped. Was it much higher than mine? There was a pause. I'm not allowed to discuss another buyer's information. I tried to accept it. I told myself that some dreams were not meant to happen. Still, something felt wrong. A week later, my mother called and asked me to come to the blue house. She sounded nervous. When I arrived, Renee was standing on the porch with that silver key. "The house is mine now," she said again. I stared at her. "How?" She folded her arms. "I made an offer before you did." The pain was not only about the house. It was the way she had listened to me talk about my dream, then quietly stepped in front of me and took it. You knew, I whispered. Renee's smile slowly disappeared. Before she could answer, a loud sound came from inside the house. It was not a window. It was not the wind. It sounded like something heavy falling beneath the floor. Renee looked toward the hallway. Then she looked back at me. For the first time that day, I saw fear in her eyes. Renee tried to laugh, but the sound came out weak. It's probably just an old pipe, she said. Neither of us believed that. The house had been standing for nearly 100 years. Old homes made strange noises, that was true, but this sound was different. It was heavy, like a large wooden box had fallen somewhere beneath the floor. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Renee unlocked the front door. Well, she said, forcing a smile, I guess I should see what it was. She stepped inside. I stayed on the porch. This was no longer my house. At least that was what I kept telling myself. I had no reason to walk through those rooms anymore. Every wall reminded me of the life I had imagined. Still, my feet carried me inside. The familiar smell of old wood and polished floors wrapped around me. Dust floated through the afternoon sunlight. The house looked almost exactly as I remembered it from childhood. Only this time, it felt different. It no longer felt welcoming. Renee walked from room to room, pretending to admire everything. I'm thinking about painting the living room, she said. I looked at her. You know Mrs. Holloway loved these colors. She's gone, Maya. Her words were cold. This is my house now. I bit my tongue. There was no point arguing. As we reached the hallway, I noticed a framed photograph hanging on the wall. It showed Mrs. Holloway standing beside the house when she was much younger. She was smiling. For some reason, looking at that picture made my chest ache. She wanted someone who loved this place, I whispered. Renee shrugged. She wanted someone who could pay for it. I didn't answer. Deep inside, something told me that wasn't true. The strange noise had come from somewhere near the back of the house. We followed the hallway toward the kitchen. Everything looked untouched. The cabinets were old but beautiful. The farmhouse sink was exactly as I remembered. Even the little blue curtains still hung over the window. Then I noticed something, the basement door. It was slightly open. When I was a little girl, Mrs. Holloway never let anyone go down there. It's only storage, she would always say with a gentle smile. I had never questioned it. Now the door stood open by only a few inches. Renee frowned. I thought I locked that. You've already been down there? Only for a minute yesterday. What's down there? Nothing. Her answer came too quickly. I looked at her face. She was hiding something. Before I could ask another question, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and stepped outside to answer it. I stayed alone in the kitchen. The quiet felt heavy. Without thinking, I walked toward the basement door. The wooden steps disappeared into darkness. Cool air drifted upward, carrying the smell of damp concrete and old cedar wood. I placed one hand on the railing. Maya, Renee's voice stopped me. She hurried back inside. Don't go down there. Why not? It isn't safe. You just said you were down there yesterday. I only looked around. She sounded nervous. I studied her face. For the first time since I arrived, my sister looked afraid instead of confident. What happened down there? Nothing. You're lying. She looked away. I hired an inspector tomorrow morning. Let him deal with it. That surprised me. Renee never spent money unless she had to. If she had hired an inspector, something serious must have worried her. Just then, another car pulled into the driveway. It was our mother. She climbed out carrying a paper bag filled with sandwiches. I figured neither of you had eaten, she said with a warm smile. She had no idea about the tension inside the house. She hugged me first, then she hugged Renee. I still can't believe one of my girls owns this beautiful place. Her words stung. I forced a smile. Mom noticed the open basement door almost immediately. Oh, she whispered. That door's open. Renee quickly stepped in front of it. I was just checking storage. Mom looked strangely uncomfortable. Mrs. Holloway never liked anyone going down there. You knew that? I asked. Mom nodded slowly. She once told me there were things hidden in this house that should only be found by the right person. The room fell silent. What things? Renee asked. Mom shook her head. She never explained. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Rain began tapping softly against the kitchen windows. None of us spoke. I looked at the dark basement stairs again. Something about that old house felt alive. And deep inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever waited below wasn't simply old furniture or forgotten boxes. It was a secret. A secret Mrs. Holloway had protected for decades. And somehow, my sister already knew more about it than she was willing to admit. Rain poured outside for the next hour, trapping the three of us inside the old house. The sound of water against the windows mixed with the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. No one seemed interested in eating the sandwiches Mom had brought. The silence between us felt heavier than the storm. Finally, Mom broke it. "You two haven't been arguing, have you?" Renee answered before I could. "No, everything's fine." I looked at her but said nothing. Everything was far from fine. Mom sighed. "I know both of you better than anyone. I can tell when something is wrong." She sat down at the old kitchen table and gently folded her hands. "I wish your father were still here. He always knew how to bring peace between you girls." At the mention of Dad, my heart softened. He had passed away 8 years earlier after a long illness. He believed family should stay together no matter what. Even during his hardest days, he never let bitterness enter our home. I wondered what he would think if he saw us now. After Mom left that evening, the rain had slowed to a light drizzle. I walked toward my car without saying goodbye. "Maya," Renee called my name. I stopped but didn't turn around. "What?" She walked toward me, wrapping her sweater tighter around herself. "I know you're upset." "Upset?" I finally faced her. "You listened to me talk about that house for years. You knew what it meant to me." She lowered her eyes. "It was just business." "No," I shook my head. "It wasn't business, it was betrayal." Her face tightened. "You don't understand." "Then explain." For a long moment, she stayed quiet. Finally, she whispered, "I had debts, Maya, bigger than you know." I stared at her. "What kind of debts?" She looked toward the house before answering. "I borrowed money from people I shouldn't have trusted." A chill ran through me. "How much?" "Almost $200,000. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How does someone even lose that much? It started with investments, then loans, then more loans to pay the first ones. She looked exhausted. "I thought buying this house would solve everything. That doesn't make any sense." She took a deep breath. "The real estate agent told me the property might be worth much more than people realized." Those words caught my attention. "What do you mean?" She said rumors had followed this house for years. "What rumors?" Renee hesitated. "That Mrs. Holloway kept something valuable hidden somewhere on the property." I felt my stomach tight. "So you didn't buy the house because you loved it?" She looked away. "You bought it because you thought it was hiding treasure." She didn't answer. Her silence told me everything. For the first time, I understood why she had beaten my offer. It wasn't the house she wanted. It was whatever she believed was inside it. I drove home that night with my thoughts spinning. Sleep never came. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital for another 12-hour nursing shift. Normally, taking care of patients helped clear my mind. Not that day. Every time I looked out the window, I pictured the blue house. I pictured the basement door, and I remembered what Mom had said. "There are things hidden in this house that should only be found by the right person." Those words wouldn't leave me alone. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was our mother. "Maya," she said quickly, "can you come after work?" "What happened?" "The inspector just left the house." My heart skipped. "And he found something strange." I gripped the phone tighter. "What did he find?" "He said one wall in the basement sounds hollow." I closed my eyes. There it was, the secret. The inspector believed there was another room behind the basement wall. Mom's voice became softer. Renee is already trying to hire someone to break it open. When? This evening. I looked at the clock in the hospital hallway. 5 more hours until my shift ended. 5 hours before they opened whatever Mrs. Holloway had hidden for decades. That evening couldn't come fast enough. As I hurried back to my patients, one elderly woman reached for my hand. "You look worried," she said gently. "I am," she smiled kindly. "My husband always told me something." "What was that?" She squeezed my fingers. "What's hidden in darkness always comes into the light." Her words stayed with me for the rest of the day, because deep inside I knew this wasn't just about an old basement anymore. Whatever waited behind that hollow wall was about to change my sister's life, and mine, forever. By the time my shift ended, the sun was already setting. I drove straight to the blue house, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. The streets of Charlotte were busy, but all I could think about was the hidden room behind that basement wall. When I pulled into the driveway, 3 pickup trucks were already parked outside. Renee had wasted no time. I hurried to the front door and found my mother standing in the hallway with worry written all over her face. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered. "Where's Renee?" "In the basement." The sound of hammers echoed through the house. I took a deep breath and followed the noise. The basement felt colder than I remembered. Bare light bulbs hung from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Dust floated through the air while 2 construction workers stood beside the hollow wall, their tools resting nearby. Renee noticed me. "I didn't invite you," she said. "I wasn't waiting for an invitation." One of the workers spoke up. "Ma'am, we've removed most of the bricks. There's definitely another room back there." My heart began to race. The worker raised his hammer one last time. With a loud crack, several old bricks fell inward. A cloud of dust filled the air. Everyone stepped back. Slowly, the dust settled. Behind the broken wall was a narrow wooden door. It looked much older than the rest of the basement. Its brass handle had turned dark with age. No one spoke. For a long moment, we simply stared at it. Renee walked forward first. "This is it," she whispered. She reached for the handle. The moment she touched it, her hand began to shake. I had never seen my sister nervous before. She slowly turned the handle. The old door creaked open. Inside was a small room no larger than a walk-in closet. There were no gold bars, no piles of cash, no treasure chest. Only a wooden table, a rocking chair, several dusty boxes, and a small iron safe resting against the far wall. Renee rushed inside. "This has to be it." She dropped to her knees beside the safe. "It has to be." The safe wasn't locked. She pulled the heavy door open. Inside sat only one large envelope and a small velvet pouch. Her smile faded. "That's all?" She tore open the envelope without hesitation. Several papers slipped onto the floor. One of them caught my attention immediately. It was my name, not Renee's, mine. Maya Johnson. I froze. Renee quickly grabbed the paper before I could. She read the first few lines. The color drained from her face. Her hands began trembling. She looked at me as though she had seen a ghost. "What is it?" I asked. She couldn't answer. Mom gently took the letter from Renee's shaking hands. Her eyes filled with tears as she read silently. Then she looked at me. "Maya," her voice broke. "This letter is for you." I slowly accepted the yellowed envelope. On the front, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "To Maya if she ever finds this room." My hands shook as I unfolded the pages. The first sentence stole my breath. "My dear Maya, if you are reading this, then my greatest wish has finally come true." Tears blurred my vision. Mrs. Holloway explained that she had never forgotten the little girl who loved her home with all her heart. She wrote about the afternoons we spent drinking lemonade on the porch. She remembered how I carefully dusted her bookshelves without being asked. She remembered me saying that houses deserved families who truly loved them. Then came the sentence that changed everything. I wanted this house to belong to you, but I knew greedy people might try to claim it after I was gone." I looked at Renee. She couldn't even meet my eyes. Mrs. Holloway explained that years earlier, she had worked with her attorney to prepare legal documents hidden inside the envelope. The document stated that if the house was ever sold, the rightful owner could transfer ownership to the person named in her final private declaration. That person was me. Not because I was rich, not because I asked for it, but because she believed I would protect the home with love instead of seeing it as a prize. The construction workers stood silently. Even they seemed stunned. I slowly reached into the velvet pouch. Inside lay a small silver key. Attached to it was a handwritten note. "This key unlocks more than a door. It unlocks the promise I made to myself many years ago." I looked toward Renee. She had turned completely pale. For the first time in her life, my sister realized she had never truly owned the house. And the greatest secret hidden beneath its foundation had never been money. It was the truth. A truth that was about to change both of our lives forever. No one spoke for several minutes. The only sound in the basement was the slow hum of the old light bulb above us. Renee stood against the wall, staring at the papers in my hands. The confidence she had carried for weeks had disappeared. She looked like someone who had just realized every decision she had made had led her to the wrong place. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at her, but I didn't answer. Those two words were something I had waited years to hear, yet they didn't erase the hurt inside me. Mom gently placed her hand on Renee's shoulder. "You should have trusted your sister." Tears rolled down Renee's face. I wasn't thinking about Maya, I was thinking about my debts. I was scared. She took a slow breath before continuing. "I heard the rumors about hidden treasure, and I convinced myself that if I bought this house, I could fix everything. I never stopped to think about what I was taking away from you." For the first time, I saw my older sister not as the confident woman who always acted like she had everything under control, but as someone who had been drowning in fear. Fear had made her selfish. Fear had made her dishonest, but it had also left her completely alone. A week later, Mrs. Holloway's attorney confirmed everything written in the hidden documents. The papers were real, legally prepared, and signed years before her passing. Because of the special agreement she had arranged with her estate, ownership of the house was transferred to me. The day I received the official keys, I stood on the front porch just as I had imagined since I was a little girl. Only this time, I wasn't dreaming. The blue house was finally home. I didn't celebrate with a big party. Instead, I unlocked the front door, walked inside, and quietly thanked Mrs. Holloway. "I'll take good care of it," I whispered. It felt as though the house itself had been waiting for those words. Over the next few months, I repaired the old porch, polished the wooden floors, and planted fresh flowers beneath every front window. I kept the kitchen almost exactly the way Mrs. Holloway had loved it because it reminded me of those warm afternoons we had shared together. The hidden room in the basement became a small reading library. I placed Mrs. Holloway's rocking chair beside the shelves and framed her letter on the wall. Every time I walked into that room, I remembered that kindness always leaves a mark long after we're gone. Renee's life took a different path. She sold nearly everything she owned to pay back part of her debts. She found a steady job instead of chasing quick money. It wasn't easy, and it took years for her to rebuild her life. More importantly, she worked hard to rebuild our relationship. At first, I kept my distance. Forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. Trust certainly doesn't. But every Sunday, she came by the house with groceries or fresh flowers. She never asked for money. She never asked for the house back. She simply showed up, hoping that one day I would believe her actions more than her words. Little by little, I did. One autumn afternoon, we sat together on the front porch watching orange leaves fall across the yard. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. I smiled. I finally understand something. She looked at me. What? I spent years believing this house was my dream. I looked around at the porch, the old oak trees, and the peaceful neighborhood, but it was never really about the house. It wasn't. I shook my head. It was about having a place filled with honesty, peace, and love. Without those things, even the biggest house feels empty. Renee nodded, wiping away a tear. I wish I had learned that sooner. So do I today. Every time I unlock that blue front door, I remember the lesson hidden beneath its basement floor. Greed can make people chase what shines. Love teaches us to protect what truly matters. My sister thought the basement was hiding a fortune. She was wrong. The greatest treasure waiting behind that old door wasn't gold, money, or jewels. It was the truth. And sometimes, the truth has a way of finding the person who has quietly carried hope in their heart for years. If this journey taught me anything, it's this: dreams built with patience can never be stolen forever. People may take opportunities, possessions, or even your place for a while, but they can never take the honesty, kindness, and quiet strength that brought you there in the first place. In the end, those are the treasures that last the longest.